The next thing that we find is that growing in one area of ibadah or character will inherently affect the other areas of your life. This is, subhanAllah, a very powerful statement from Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah as well on this idea. And before I say the statement, let me give you an example here. If you're going to the gym and you're working out a primary muscle, there are all sorts of benefits to surrounding muscles, right? That maybe will not be identified on the chart on the side of a machine. But your overall health is increasing and the muscles around it are getting stronger as well. And sometimes they're really small muscles and small things that people don't even see, right? But there's an overall benefit. That doesn't mean that you don't have to focus some attention and diversify and hit those different muscle groups. But what that means is that when you're improving one element of your health, you're improving all of it. And so when you're becoming a more focused Muslim on your character, on your faith, and you're actually targeting certain goals for yourself every single year, that this year, this is how I want to look like a better Muslim this year. That's going to, at the bare minimum, influence your ethic and how you approach your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it will influence other elements of your character as well. And Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah speaks about this particularly when it comes to good character, when it comes to good mannerisms. You know, I just talked about how some people might excel in ritual, but not necessarily character. Some people might excel in character, but not necessarily ritual. And that discrepancy is sometimes very clear. He said, rahimahullah ta'ala, الدين كله خلق فمن زاد عليك في الخلق زاد عليك في الدين. Subhanallah. He said the religion in its entirety is good character. So whoever surpasses you in good character has surpassed you in religion. This separation of practice from practical on an everyday life is not an Islamic separation. This is a religion that is meant to transform every single facet of your life. If you have a Prophet ﷺ who taught you that there's a connection between your dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with your tongue and your heart and the foot that you're going to step into the restroom with, then certainly the sunnah transforms and connects and aligns everything from how you act in the masjid to how you act in your most private room in your home. From how you act with the closest person in the world to you, with the person who's furthest away from you. From how you act with someone who has a financial commitment to you to someone who has absolutely no worldly connection to you. It's going to transform that and align it, because the Prophet ﷺ taught us something that's coherent, that transforms character and deen all together. The last couple of things I'll say here is that if you address those things, that's where you'll find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will unlock a particular brilliance for you. So this isn't contradicting to say that the Sahaba had specialties, even though they were all balanced. They did have specialties, things that they excelled in. So Abu Bakr, Omar, Uthman and Ali, may Allah be pleased with them. Khadija, Aisha, may Allah be pleased with them. They didn't excel in the same ways. They were balanced, they had the fundamentals, and then they had a particular genius. Just like a good basketball team, a good football team, and the companions are far greater than any team. But you got to have the center, the power forward, the small forward, and you get where I'm going with this. The shooting guard and the point guard, and I'm not going to start assigning which companion is who. But you got to have people playing their different roles, and that's how you become a more wholesome team. That's how you become a more wholesome community. And the beauty of the companions is that the Prophet ﷺ was able to unlock that genius in every single person. So you don't necessarily look at another person and say, that's how I'm going to be a good Muslim. Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala, one time there was a man, it's a very famous letter, I'll read the first few lines of it. A man who sent him a letter that was admonishing Imam Malik rahimahullah because he perceived a deficiency in him in one particular route. You know, this was sort of the thing, like the scholars and the warriors, right? There are very few people that were playing both roles, that were scholars and warriors in the battlefield as well. So sometimes the warriors would say that guy's just sitting in the library the whole time. Sometimes a scholar would say that person who's active all the time doesn't even have real ilm. And that could be a trick of shaitan to start pitting people against each other, right? So Imam Malik rahimahullah responded with a very famous statement. He said, "Inna Allah qassama al-a'mala kama qassama al-arzaq." He said, Allah has apportioned His good deeds the same way He's apportioned His sustenance. Meaning what? Just like some people have different worldly circumstances that are more favorable in one regard, some people have a particular portion from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that comes natural to them in terms of good deeds. Their personalities, their environments have cultivated them, their circumstances towards easy, low-hanging fruits when it comes to good deeds. He says, فَرُبَّ رَجُلٍ فُتِحَ لَهُ فِي الصَّلَاةِ وَلَمْ يُفْتَحْ لَهُ فِي الصَّوْمِ. He said a person, for example, might find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has unlocked the door of prayer for that person, but not necessarily with fasting. Meaning what? Not that they don't fast Ramadan and they pray Qiyamul Layl. No, but that they find it easier and more pleasing to pray extra, but they don't necessarily fast extra. That's not their ibadah, that's not their worship. And he says, وَآخَرَ فُتِحَ لَهُ فِي الصَّدَقَةِ وَلَمْ يُفْتَحْ لَهُ فِي الصَّوْمِ. And another person who Allah made charity easy for that person, but not necessarily fasting. So he goes through these examples and he says, look, I'm satisfied. I know that Allah has opened a particular door for me in ilm, and I hope that Allah will accept it. I hope that Allah will accept it. Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, one time someone went to him and said, we don't find you fasting extra days. It's very peculiar. You don't necessarily fast too many extra days. There's this idea that everyone who's getting religious should start to fast Mondays, Thursdays, the middle 3 days, every other day, for example. They didn't find Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu necessarily shining in that regard. And he said, look, I teach Quran all day. I read and I teach Quran. Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiallahu anhu was a walking Quran. And he said that qira'at al-Quran is more beloved to me than a siyam. He said, for me, reading the Quran, teaching the Quran is more beloved to me than fasting. I'm happy with what Allah has apportioned for me here. Like, I'm okay with this, excelling in this regard. So you're not necessarily going to excel in everything, but excel in the things that come easiest to you without being betrayed by those qualities. If I could summarize this past hour, excel in the qualities that come easy to you, the deeds that come easy to you, without betraying those qualities with flaws that you ignore. All right? Now, with that being said, the Prophet ﷺ also said that there are two types, that envy is bad except in two cases. Envy is bad. La hasada, there is no envy except in two cases. A person who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave knowledge to and they recite it, and one narration spread it, meaning that they read it at night, so they pray at night with that knowledge, they recite the Quran, or they teach it, they preach it, right? So a person who Allah has given ilm and they spread it, or a person who Allah has given wealth and they spend it. Prophet ﷺ said there is no envy except in these two cases. But isn't that a contradiction to what Imam Malik rahimahullah said? Absolutely not, and I'll tell you why. Someone might say, I really, really want to be that rich person. All right? And I will give sadaqah if I get rich. But what they envy about the person is not the sadaqah part. They're using the sadaqah part to embrace that position and not find a contradiction with their religion. So if I get there, I'll give a lot of charity too. They might like the praise that comes with it. They might like the lifestyle that comes with it and says, well, the sadaqah certainly washes that away. And so this is great. I want to be that person, right? So you get a community where every single person wants to become a doctor. We need doctors, by the way. I'm not telling anyone to drop med school, but every single, they think wealth, 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 wealth. And there's more to it than that, right? But the Prophet ﷺ is not talking about that. The Prophet ﷺ is talking about a person who sees someone who's benefiting with their sadaqah and they're envying the benefit part. Like, I wish I could give that much benefits. And so what does that translate into for them? They try to make up for their inability to give charity with their wealth, with their volunteering, with their work, with all of the other things they can do with themselves so that they can match the benefit in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a person who Allah gives knowledge to and they spread it. Now, by the way, in another narration, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that whoever seeks knowledge so that they can argue with scholars, shame the ignorant, or لِيَصْرِفَ إِلَيْهِ وُجُوهَ النَّاسِ, turn people's attention to them, Allah will enter them into hellfire. May Allah protect us all. So you're not envying man, I want to be a speaker. That looks great. I want to be on YouTube one day. I want to have TikToks going viral. I want to have this and this and that. This, I want to be on the minbar one day. No, none of that. They're envying the benefits and saying, I want to benefit people like that. I want to be a guide for people towards khair, towards good. So that's either going to unlock in me that I need to learn more, or I need to find ways to maybe open the pathways of ilm for other people. So maybe I'll facilitate that knowledge towards other people because I want to get some of the reward of that benefit. So the competition does not become about the specifics, it becomes about the reward and output. That we all have this zeal to want to compete, and that makes us all better. That makes us all better. You know, I don't want to use too many basketball examples. I feel like I've used too many of those already. Some of you are like, we don't know what you're talking about here, right? But, you know, a great player doesn't just study everyone at their position, right? They become a student of every great player and try to adopt what they can, try to learn from what they can and bring it into their lives. And that keeps them getting greater and greater and greater and greater. What does that mean for a Muslim? وَفِي ذَلِكَ فَلْيَتَنَافَسَ الْمُتَنَافِسُونَ. Let them compete in that good. سَابِقُوا, rushing, racing. Omar ibn Abdul Aziz rahimahullah. You all have heard of Omar ibn Abdul Aziz rahimahullah? So in 2 years, this man turned the ummah around. 38 to 40, by the way. He was only 38 years old when he became the Khalifa. Incredible human being. The great grandson of Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Incredible human being. One of the most accomplished people in Islamic history is Umar ibn Abdul Aziz rahimahullah. He died when he was 40. He was the governor of Medina when he was 25 years old till 32, and then he became the Khalifa at 38. What the man did, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, is incredible. I mean, one of the most accomplished people in Islamic history, to the point that there's consensus, according to many of the scholars, that he's the first mujaddid of Islam, the first reviver of Islam after Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala anhu. In his generation, he is the reviver. So if you're Umar ibn Abdul Aziz and people are telling you this stuff and you're seeing the accomplishments, you're probably thinking to yourself like, I'm good. But Umar ibn Abdul Aziz one day goes out in the morning to do dhikr, and he finds Mujahid, rahimahullah, who was a mufassir of Quran, a great scholar of tafsir, and he finds him remembering Allah at the riverbank and crying and weeping and getting close to Allah. And he looks at Mujahid and he goes, woe to you, O Mujahid. كيف ألقى ربي في يوم أنت فيه ملاقي. How am I supposed to meet Allah on the same day that you meet Allah? Like, man, I gotta do better. How am I supposed to meet Allah on the same day that you're gonna meet Him? He saw something Mujahid was doing that he wasn't doing, and that inspired him. It didn't shut him off, make him despondent, because that's how we are as an ummah. And his great-grandfather, Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu, had one person in the ummah after the Prophet ﷺ that was greater than him, and that was Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu. And Umar radiallahu anhu, what does he say about himself? I always wanted to compete with Abu Bakr, and he always beat me out. So I thought one day I'm going to surpass him. And this is probably a good segue into a fundraiser, all right? Because you've all heard this maybe in a fundraiser. One day I was going to surpass Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. The Prophet ﷺ was asking for wealth. I brought a bunch of my money. Prophet ﷺ said, what have you left for your family? He said, half of it, Ya Rasulullah, for Allah and His Messenger, half of it for the family. MashaAllah, ahsant ya Umar, great job. Then Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu comes and he gives all of his wealth for the sake of Allah. And he's like, I don't know what to do. I can't beat out Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. But he kept trying. And some of the greatness of the Khilafah of Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu is that he always had Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu ahead of him and was always thinking to himself, you've exhausted everyone that comes after you. I got to do better. I've got to be like you. I've got to try to be more like you. That's the culture we want to have. And so being a more wholesome Muslim means being a more wholesome community. And it means looking at the best examples around you to inspire you, not the worst examples around you to make you complacent. Or even worse, condescending and judgmental. Looking at the best examples, people that have something that you know that you don't have, and I want the benefit and the reward, so I'm going to push myself to do even better. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us people that inspire and are inspired. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us for our shortcomings. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rid us of any of the destructive flaws that could do away with our good deeds. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us towards that which is pleasing to Him, that which makes us more pleasing servants to Him. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rectify us and rectify through us. May Allah correct our hearts, correct our deeds. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala correct our creed, correct our ideas, correct our practices.